Well, welcome everybody to the October online program for the clients of the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, British Columbia. And this month, we're going to talk about some of the things that the alumni have told us about their struggles in recovery. And these are particularly alumni who have had a slip. Okay? And this is really important information for everyone, because you can always learn from people who have struggled. Sometimes much better than you can learn from people who everything seems to be going great for them. So this month we'll take a bunch of topics that the alumni have actually come up with themselves, explaining to us like what the big surprise was when they got out of treatment. They thought they had this addiction thing all figured out and what their problem was, and they had this great plan, and they walk out there and then something happens to them, some big surprise that they weren't expecting. Because usually the way they made sense of their addiction really didn't work all that well for them. And that's important because however it is that you make sense of your addiction is going to dictate what you do in recovery to overcome it. Okay? So, start off with one, and this is an interesting one. Do you remember that workshop that I gave you guys on what the great writers who were also addicts had said about addiction? And a lot of them talked about it was actually a matter of meaning, lacking meaning and purpose in your life, or it was a matter of lack of spirituality, or something along that line, right? But before that, in my humorous introduction, I gave you cures for addiction, right? And one of those cures was what Nancy Reagan told everyone to do a few decades ago, and that was just say no. And every time I make that comment, everybody in the room has a big laugh because they say, oh, that's ridiculous. It's not a matter of just saying no. But it's always amazing to me about how many clients that I meet at Sunshine Coast, and not everyone, it's actually a small percentage, but there are enough of them who think, all I have to do is stay away from the drugs and I'll be fine, which is basically another way of saying just say no. And they truly believe this. I've had them in the office, right, talking to them, and they seem really genuine to me. They say, look, I know drinking is just not an option anymore. And they look totally genuine, and I'm sure they're committed to this and they believe it. So this is how they make sense of their addiction. Okay, my addiction is I drink too much, or I use too much coke or heroin or whatever. So all I have to do is just not drink. So drinking is no longer an option. Then they get out in the real world and something happens in their life, and all of a sudden, apparently, drinking is an option because they tell us then they had a slip. In fact, one of the more interesting things is, as I think back to all the fellows that I've talked to who have just said to me, drinking is not an option. And therefore, as long as I don't drink, I'll be fine. And that's basically their approach to recovery. Just don't drink whatever happens. Don't drink. And they don't do anything else. That very often, those people are the ones who slip the quickest. It's just an interesting thing I've observed over the years. Because maybe addiction is a little more complicated than that, right? And so this is a good thing to learn, right? So on the one hand, of course, we get a big laugh at the SCHC workshop when I tell you, just say no to drugs. But on the other hand, there are some clients who truly believe this. They think that their addiction equals using too many drugs or drinking too much booze. And if all they can do is just stop doing that, just convince themselves it's no longer an option, that somehow it'll be fine. But one of the great problems of this is it's not really a good way to make sense of the addiction, particularly, as you know, being clients of the Sunshine Coast Health Center, that we interpret addiction in line with the great Viktor Frankl, who said that addiction is a response to living a life that really doesn't have a lot of personal meaning. In other words, you aren't really being true to yourself. Okay? And that's a lot more powerful way of looking at the addiction as opposed to just saying no. Because people who say just say no very often end up saying yes later on. Anyway, that's this week's edition, and we'll be back next week with another topic.